like to do is welcome you all here with a song. Mauri's not here yet. So.
He's what? Ditch the bottom.
All right. The first thing I'd like to do is welcome you here with a song. 9/11 doesn't have a lot of publicly played music, but there's an awful lot of it out there. One of the organizations that has been promoting it is 9/11 Truth Outreach, and we have a collection of songs that we've been promoting in something we call TruSic, the Truth in Music video. This one here is not part of that collection, but it's one of my favorites because music is what has inspired many people in the 60s to become active and to get informed. And so this is Sharon Eberu, who will sing a song called Still Asking Why, and then we'll launch into our program. So, my name is Wayne Coste. I'm a licensed professional engineer. I've been involved with the issues related to 9/11 for about 6 years. It took me a while to get up to speed on what actually happened and to understand how important it was. I've been involved with architects and engineers for most of that time as one of their presenters, the Congressional Outreach Team Leader, and a number of other functions. I've given a number of presentations, and what I'd like to do, although I'm going to go through it, I think, fairly briefly, since I think we're all familiar with the official story and how it is wrong. So what I usually do is give an overview of some of the technical issues real briefly. And what I'd like to do today is just kind of hit some of the high points, some of the things that I believe resonate with people who are still unclear about what actually happened and still in the trance, the media-induced trance that the planes knocked down the three towers. Just as a show of hands, how many here have any doubts at all that it was some form of explosives that destroyed the Twin Towers? Is everyone here? Okay, raise your hands if you think it was. Right, great. So for the most part, we're all on board with the fact that it was explosives. But because not everyone is on board, I will go through some of the high-level issues related to it. And I'm really glad that we have some people who are still kind of questioning what we say and still willing to come here and address this. So the first thing that we want to do is go through a side-by-side comparison of Building 7. Building 7 came down at 5:20 in the afternoon on September 11th. The building on the left is the 47-story Building 7, and on the right-hand side it was a known controlled demolition. Dan Rather that evening said that it was also reminiscent of a, let's see, let me turn this volume up.
You say non-control or you say control demolition?
Oh, it was
The one on the right.
the one on the right was a known controlled demolition.
Known, K-N-O-W-N.
Known.
Right,
known.
yes.
Okay, I understood known.
Right, yes. So we were showing it to show that they have very similar characteristics and that the buildings are, in fact, coming down at what you call free fall acceleration. This was supposed to have been caused by a small fire in the corner of the building on floor 13. A major study was done, fraudulent, that tried to put together a model of how the building was failed. And you can see the entire steel structure bolted and welded into place is just crumbling as if it was no more than a pile of Jenga blocks put together. They will not release their calculations to architects and engineers because, in fact, we believe it's fraudulent, and they've been caught in omissions of some key critical factors. So the one on the right over here is a known controlled demolition, I believe someplace in Italy, building almost as big as the Building 7. If you want to know what a gravity-only collapse looks like, this is a French technique called vernage, where they pull out the center line, and we'll see this again. And notice the parts that are falling down, going down much faster than the roof line, which is a key when I go and talk about what happens to the Twin Towers. We're going to see it again. Now, here what they do is they pull one of the floors out of alignment. The top starts crushing down, and the thing that is to be seen here is the top's coming down, and there's material here that's falling much faster than the roof line is coming down. The roof line is going down at a slower rate because it has to do crushing work. Energy has to be consumed breaking the building up instead of accelerating it down. When we get to the Twin Towers, we'll see that the demolition is proceeding as faster than free fall acceleration. People say that the Twin Towers cannot be controlled demolition because they always start at the bottom. Well, this one here started at the top just to show that they can start any place. The key thing is, if you stop blowing up a building, it stops coming apart. We'll see what happens in a few minutes there. So this one here started in the middle. It looks an awful lot like what happened to the Twin Towers. People say that the Twin Towers were flimsily built. In fact, they were extremely robust. They were the pride of America as they were being built. And the core column, which supported the 2/3 of the gravity weight of the building, and the perimeter columns supported 1/3 of the gravity. But this is a huge matrix of steel, huge steel core columns that were destroyed on 9/11. These perimeter columns are 4 tons. They're bolted and welded into place. And on September 11th, during the demolition, they'll be breaking the bolts, breaking the welds, and being ejected out at up to 70 miles an hour in all directions, suggesting a huge amount of explosive energy in the center, the core of the building. you can see the core columns here in the center. These are all prefabbed and put into place. Seems to be going slower than usual here. So it's a very dense, very strong web, starting off with 6-inch thick steel at the base, and tapering down to much thinner 1/4-inch steel columns at the roof line. These floor pans are going to be put into place. They're going to have 4 to 6 inches of concrete on top of them, and there's 2 official stories about how the building came down. The first one has these bolts that you see floating in. And in the first official story, they break, but because that would have required the insurance companies to not have to pay anything, in the final version they held. Now this is where we look at the North Tower demolition waves, and this is where you're going to see the top of we'll see it a couple of times, twice. You'll see the top coming down, but along the side here, you see this stuff is keeping up with the stuff that's falling in free fall. We'll see this a second time, and again, things cannot go down and do damage at the same rate as stuff that's in free fall. That's steel and aluminum pieces in free fall, and it can't go so. And you can see going down just through the center line of the building is where the demolition is being. There's a demolition wave going down through the center line. It can't be a gravity-only collapse. It's too small a segment, and it's going too fast. In the South Tower, we'll see the same thing. What you see here is that the demolition is coming down, and floor by floor by floor by floor. You can see it on this side, and a little bit on the other side from stuff being ejected out. The steel and aluminum that's been ejected out here is out in free fall and doesn't have time to come down and obscure the next level of demolition. So this demolition is proceeding as fast or faster than free fall acceleration at this part of the building. It's absolutely incredible for this to be happening, and explosives are the only thing that can be causing it, and basically floor by floor by floor. Not huge, massive explosions, but a whole series of them. It can't be a pancake collapse. This is what the official story suggests, but as you would imagine, by the time you get to the bottom, you'll be able to see floor 78 and 79 on top and floor 80, but there's nothing there. And in fact, in the miracle of Ladder 6, the 13 survivors from Ladder 6, what happens is they look up and they see blue sky. The top of the South Tower, as you know, rotated up to 22 degrees, and with the angular momentum should have carried it down, because buildings have a lot of structural integrity. But if you stop blowing up a building, they stop coming apart, as I said. Here are some failed controlled demolitions. These failed controlled demolitions show that if you can drop a building 5 stories, and what will happen is the building will stay together. It won't keep continuing to crumble, but it will stay together. And this one's going to drop about 8 stories. And again, it stops, and once you stop blowing up the building, it doesn't keep coming apart. So the Twin Towers, by contrast, were destroyed by explosives all the way down. Now, these people here probably didn't get their bonus for the day, but it shows you that a building can actually roll over and stay together. The aerial view of the North Tower when it was being destroyed shows everything going in all directions. This is the smoke that was drifting out of the windows. And there's nothing doing the crushing. I'll be presenting a paper in Europe this summer, talking about some of the fraudulent analysis that's been done, and I think with that I'll close this part of this session, because there's nothing else that we need to talk about there. So that's the background for what happened on September 11th to the Twin Towers and to Building 7. The official story is that the planes and the fires were so intense that the buildings were destroyed, and it doesn't stand up to any scrutiny at all. The consequences of all this is that the alleged 19 Muslim hijackers, Islamic jihadists, were the ones that caused this. And as a result, we all know what happened to the American Muslim community and the worldwide Muslim community as the anger and the rage of what happened on September 11th permeated throughout our society. What I'd like to do next is invite David Slesinger to give a talk.
It'll be Mauri next.
Oh, Mauri's next? Okay. Dave, do you want to introduce Mauri?
Well, Mauri is a very dedicated activist for the rights of Muslims in this country, and
Speak into there. Okay.
he travels a goodly amount on that behalf. He's a poet, and at the UNAC conference a couple of weeks ago in Jersey, it's the first time a Muslim speaker actually acknowledged the lies involved with 9/11. All the Muslims who have ever spoken at the UNAC conferences over the years were too frightened to make that admission. And if you want to say more in the introduction of yourself, that'd be fine.
Okay. That's quite enough. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I want to, how much time do I have?
20?
20 minutes,
25?
okay, that's good. 20 minutes is good. First of all, I want to begin by thanking David and Wayne for giving me this opportunity to represent the voice of Muslims in America who are not afraid to acknowledge or to aid in the dispelling of certain sacred cows within this socio-political construct that has us all in its grip. 9/11 and what is alleged to have happened according to the official narrative on 9/11 is one of the sacred cows that many otherwise courageous voices within alternative media, within the human rights and civil liberties communities in America have been afraid to touch. And to my dismay, there are many leaders, many Muslim leaders and organizations, large, well-established organizations in America that have all been unwilling to challenge that sacred cow of 9/11, the official narrative. And it has hurt us tremendously. It has hurt America, and it has also hurt the Muslim community in America and abroad, because there have been many things that have been done in the name of responding to the attacks of 9/11 that have violated the norms of what is supposed to be a civilized society. And touching upon this issue of how comfortable it can be to address and challenge the government on certain issues, but on this issue, not. I was listening to Democracy Now!, I think it was yesterday, as I was driving, and Amy and her crew were doing another excellent program on things that Americans, that their listeners, both here and possibly abroad, given the width and breadth of communications these days, things that they need to know. and they were having, as part of their fundraising drive for Pacifica, they were offering a DVD and a book, and they were talking about the contradictions surrounding TWA's Flight 800 and Gary Webb, who was the courageous, now deceased journalist who pulled the cover off of the CIA's drug dealing during the Reagan administration to support the Contras. I mean, and as I was driving and listening to the program, I was again marveling at how valuable this kind of information is, but how, you know, when it, and thinking about it within the context of what we were going to be dealing with here today, why this issue can't receive that same level of courageous advocacy, journalistic advocacy, investigative prowess, or just willingness to speak out. I'll never forget years ago when one of the former producers of Pacifica right here in New York at WBAI contacted me because he wanted to give me a copy of a tape, an audio tape, of the government-paid agent provocateur that was involved in the World Trade Center bombing of 1993, the Egyptian Imad Salem. And so I received this call from the producer, and I don't think he's there at WBI anymore, but you know, he had heard some of the. I think what had happened is I think he had seen the presentation that we did at the National Press Club shortly within a month or two after the attack of 9/11. And I remember vividly how fearful the Muslim establishment in the Washington area was for us to broker that subject at the National Press Club, because they knew my position. You know, I had made it very clear from day one that I didn't believe the official narrative. And I'm not an engineer, but it just didn't sound right. It didn't make sense. And so we did this conference at the National Press Club, and we had a number of respected figures within the African American community. In fact, only two of us that were part of that. I think it was about a 7-person panel. Only two of us were Muslim, and the rest were non-Muslims. A former 25-year veteran of the police department. Then he had already retired, but he was the executive director then of the National Black Police Association. We had a professor from Howard University, Nkiji Taifa, I believe her name is. We had Reverend Graylin Hagler, and a few others. It was a very, very provocative discussion we had on 9/11 and its aftermath. And again, this came within a month or two of the tragedy. And you can go to the archives of C-SPAN, because they did cover it, and you can actually pull the video up. So anyway, he saw the video, and he ended up contacting me because we were the ones that had organized this presentation. And he said he had something he wanted to send me. He wanted to give me. So a few days later, I received in the mail this audio CD, and it was fascinating. I mean, this is, you know, the Egyptian agent provocateur, former colonel, I think he was, in the Egyptian military, who had been working for a number of years for the FBI. I think his FBI handler, I think his name was Tom. And, you know, here he is, because of the lack of trust that existed between him and his handlers, he felt that as an insurance policy, he needed to start taping some of their conversations. And in this one conversation of what was sent to me, here he is talking about the bombing of the World Trade Center and how wonderful it was, how much, you know, and he's talking to his FBI handler. And he's, they're, you know, one of the prickly things that he's talking about is the need for more money, et cetera. And he's talking about the operation that had just taken place. And I thought to myself then, I mean, when I received it, how many times has this been played over Pacifica Radio? They had possession of it. How many times has this been played? I never heard it. I'm sure that it was played at least once, but I never heard it. And it gets back to the whole issue of fear and how even folks and institutions, organizations that normally would be courageous when it comes to certain issues, they can shy away from, you know, the sacred cows of the, you know, this political propagandistic machinery if the cow is big enough and terrifying enough. And that's what this 9/11 issue represents. Without question, it has been the basis of intensified war on a people that had nothing, even if the scenario of 9/11 was as they claimed it is. I mean, the people that are being directly impacted, who are being killed, who are being maimed, who are having their sons and now daughters imprisoned for, you know, insane periods of time for what, according to the government, are aspirational offenses. I mean, no material offense took place, but the government claims they wanted to do X, Y, and Z. They were planning to do X, Y, and Z, and 9 times out of 10, they're planning to do this with an agent provocateur being paid for by the government in the mix, egging them on, encouraging them. And so, you know, and I'm telling you, I mean, there are young men. You know, there was one of the former top deputies of the Attorney General of the Bush administration. What was the Attorney General's name? Ashcroft. A deputy by the name of Viet Den. He spoke at the ABA, the American Bar Association conference in Naples, Florida in January of 2002. And in his presentation, he said he was the first high-ranking government official to admit that the government was engaged in not just racial but religious profiling. He admitted it. He admitted that the government was targeting young Muslims between the ages of 18 and 35. And during the Q&A period, when the question arose, what is the basis? What is the basis of the criteria that you are using for this targeting, this profiling? He said the same criteria that Al-Qaeda is using. Young men between the ages of 18 and 35 who come from countries where Al-Qaeda has a strong presence. That could be anywhere. It can be predominantly Muslim countries. It can be countries like America and Britain and France that have Muslim minorities that appear to be growing. But he openly admitted 18 to 35. And what we have seen since 9/11 is institutionalized madness in the name of national security, in the name of a war on terrorism, that is targeting and taking away young men, primarily within this age bracket, and now increasingly young women as well. But what is significant to note is that this didn't begin with 9/11. What 9/11 did was it accelerated what was already in place and put a stamp of approval on it officially. The late Bill Kunstler, may he rest in peace, he wrote a book, My Life as a Radical Lawyer. I don't know how many of you have read it. If you haven't, you should. In that book, there is a chapter titled The Despised Muslim. And he begins that chapter with these words: today, Muslims are the most hated group in America. The moment a Muslim is accused of a crime, the specter of terrorism is raised and everyone panics. Now, the significance of this quote is the fact that this was made before 9/11. This book came out in what, 95, 96? This was before 9/11. But this was after the first World Trade Center bombing, which had an agent provocateur working for the government who was engineering that crime that he got paid handsomely for. 7 people, I think it was 6 or 7 people died. But what 9/11 did was put the official stamp of approval on the madness. And it accelerated what was already in place. And it's been terrible. You know, one of the worst, in fact, in my humble opinion, for me, in my opinion, the worst vice president in modern American history, Mr. Cheney. He had what was called the 1% doctrine. If there is a 1% chance that this individual or this group or this organization or this country is a threat to America's national interests, we should proceed against it as if it is a 100% guarantee. The 1% doctrine. Iraq fell under the 1% doctrine. Weapons of mass destruction that now the world knows never existed. And them deciding to go after the man who had been their man in Baghdad for years and years and years. And when they decided, okay, he was of no more use, they did to him what they did to their man in Haiti, Duvalier. What they did to their man in the Philippines, Marcos. What they did to their man in Panama, Noriega. You know, we use them. There are no permanent friends, only interests. We use them up, we dismiss them. But there are people who form what the military calls collateral damage, whose lives are being destroyed. Right here, not far from New York, New Jersey, in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, a family, an Albanian family, who came to America to breathe free and for the opportunities that America offers, you know, beckons to people around the world. Bring us your tired, your, you know. And this family, this Albanian family, they have 3 sons, not just one, 3 sons that were taken away from them in the name of national security. What was their crime? Going off into the Poconos with their friends, 2 of whom happened to be agent provocateurs working for the government, and skiing and shooting at a firing range, everything legal in the Poconos on their vacation, videotaping it all, and then wanting everyone who was part of that vacation to have a copy of, you know, the videotape. They had a lot of fun. And so they go to an outlet to get the tape duplicated so that everyone can have a copy of the vacation. And as the person is duplicating the tape, he notices that there are these young Muslims, you know, shooting on the firing range and saying Allahu Akbar. It looks suspicious. Turns it over to the police, hands it over to the FBI. The provocateurs weren't involved then. They weren't on the vacation. They came later. When the FBI saw it, then that's when they were inserted into the mix. And then over the course of a year or two, you know, egging them on, challenging them, suggesting the terrible, things that Muslims should do because of what's being done to Muslims in Iraq and in various other, in Afghanistan and other places we should do. And then when a couple of the young men started responding approvingly, engaging in irresponsible speech, even irresponsible speech is supposed to be protected in America, but engaging in irresponsible speech, a couple of them, then he starts turning on his recorder and taping. And then when the authorities felt they have enough information, okay, let's now go after them. 3 young men, and you know what they got? Life sentences. Nothing ever happened. Nothing material ever happened. But these young men are under life sentences without the possibility of parole for aspirational offenses. I wish they were the only one, but I can just go on and on and on and on. It seems like every other week there's another case. There's another case of someone now trying to go overseas. And for trying to go overseas, getting stopped at the airport, getting arrested before they leave their home, about to go to the airport to go overseas. They're facing a minimum, a young person, 19, 20 years old, a minimum of 15 years. It's crazy. And I'm going to conclude with the case that has dominated our limited well of resource and time and energy within our organization over the past 6 years. I mean, we're dealing with a lot of cases and issues, but the one that gets the lion's share of our limited time and attention and resource is the case of a Muslim woman. And I'll end with this because this is what I was invited to the UNAC conference to briefly address. And it's a case that tears at my heart. There's a young woman by the name of Afia Siddiqui. Afia Siddiqui. Her name is spelled Aafia. Last name Siddiqui. Afia Siddiqui came to the United States when she was 18 years old from Karachi, Pakistan. A very gifted young woman. She is the youngest of her siblings. She has an older brother and sister. Her brother lives in Houston, Texas. He's an architect by profession. Her sister is a physician in Karachi, Pakistan. Afia came, the baby of the family, and she lived for that first year with her brother in Houston and did her freshman year at the University of Houston. She got a full scholarship to MIT. She goes off to MIT. She graduates from MIT with honors. She goes from MIT to Brandeis, again graduating with honors with a PhD in cognitive neuroscience. She was very active at all 3 of the universities. Part of her activism was in the area of humanitarian relief. Because of this activism and her academic prowess, her brilliance, a cloud of suspicion came over her after 9/11, when activists all over the country, Muslim activists, were coming under a cloud of suspicion. She went back home in 2002, a year later, less than a year later. And in March of 2003, by this time she's married. She has 2 young children that were born in Boston, American citizens by birth. Her youngest baby that was in her womb when she left America to go back to Pakistan, Suleiman, he was born in Karachi. 6 months after he was born, him in the arms of his mother with his brother and sister, they get into a taxi cab. They're on their way to the airport in Karachi to visit a maternal uncle in Islamabad. The taxi is stopped. All 4 of them are forcibly removed. And then they disappear for the next 5 years. They disappear. No one knows where they are. And a mysterious person riding a motorcycle, never takes off his helmet, comes to the door of the grandmother and warns her, don't say anything, be quiet. If you ever want to see your loved ones again, just be quiet. 5 years later, 4 men escaped from Bagram in Afghanistan. Bagram controlled by America, just like Abu Ghraib in Iraq and Guantanamo in Cuba. They're controlling this detention center. These 4 men escaped. They tell how they were disappeared, how they were tortured. They tell the stories of this one woman whose name they didn't know. They would see her periodically when she was being moved or when they wanted to humiliate her in front of them. They didn't know her name, but they described her, a young Pakistani woman who had spent a number of years in the United States, had been torn from her children, didn't know where they were. And even though they wouldn't see her every day, they would hear her scream every day, her haunting screams because of what was being done to her. And people in the know began to put 2 and 2 together, put pressure on the authorities. This is probably Afia Siddiqui. They ended up releasing her and then setting her up to be killed. She was shot. She didn't die. She was brought back half dead to the United States. And then she spent 18 months in New York City, right here in this city, in pretrial confinement under conditions that violate the Constitution's guarantee against cruel and unusual punishment. Was put on trial. All the evidence in her favor. The government claimed that the reason why she was shot in 2008 was that while she was waiting to be reinterrogated, one of the soldiers laid his M4 rifle on the floor, and she, like a female Rambo, went to grab it, pick it up, took the safety off of it, and fired it, attempting to murder U.S. personnel. So for attempted murder, she ends up getting an 86-year sentence. And right now she sits on a military base in Fort Worth, Texas, cut off from the outside world. A shell of her former self. A shell. These are the things that are stoking the anger within the Muslim community, here and abroad. And I guess the best way that I can conclude this presentation is by saying, you know, what these gentlemen are doing, you know, pushing this issue is what we all should be doing. We should be pushing this issue, trying to, destroy this sacred cow of 9/11 so that we can begin to see things as they are and we can put this country on a better track than what it's on right now. Because if we don't, I fear for where this country, given the trajectory it's on right now, based upon something that is a complete lie. If we don't do something to change this soon, you know, it's not just going to be Muslims that are being adversely affected in these horrendous ways. It will be more and more and more of the rest of us as well. So with that said, I want to thank you again for inviting me, and may nothing but good come out of this session and the other sessions that are taking place here at the Left Forum this weekend. And thank you.